Hey everybody, welcome back to the Top Water King YouTube channel, and today we're going to be talking about jigs and jig trailers, why I choose the jig trailers to specific jigs and all that stuff. So buckle up and get ready because this is probably going to be quite a long video, probably somewhere around 20 to 30 minutes. But yeah, we're going to cover everything with jigs. We're going to talk about swim jigs, flipping jigs, finesse jigs, micro jigs, giant jigs, and all the trailers that I use with them. So I think we got 7 trailers and 5 jigs. If I look, yep, 5 jigs and I think 7 trailers. So yeah, let's go ahead and get into this. So the first jig we're going to talk about is the big one. This is the kind of, certain people would probably call it ridiculous looking jig, but I call it a possible gigantic bass catching machine. And this is the 1 ounce Straight King Denny Brauer, what is this called? Denny Brauer heavy cover jig. I haven't even talked about this thing in so long I forgot what it's called. But I don't have just a normal trailer on this jig, like a 3 or 4 inch crawl bait. I have the giant Doxler Company 5-inch mega mud crawler that you guys have seen me talk about here lately. This thing is huge. I mean, you guys can see there compared to my hand. My hands are not exactly small. They're pretty big compared to a lot of other people. And this is a giant jig. You guys can see there, it goes pretty much the full length of my hand. Here it is compared to my phone. This is a Samsung phone. So that there kind of shows you how big it is compared to that, a big smartphone. I guess you want to call it a smartphone. I hate the daggum thing, but it's called a smartphone. I call it a stupid phone. But anyway, you guys can see it there compared to that phone. It is a heck of a jig. I mean, it's a heck of a chunk to be throwing out there for them bass. But I tell you what, I think if I can get just like maybe 3 or 4 bites on this thing, I think that I could possibly get a big one up on land or in the boat or whatever I'm fishing from at the time. But it is a big bait, and the reason why I went with this crawfish is, why not, right? This one here didn't really have a whole lot of thought into why I paired this giant crawfish up with this jig. This is a heavy jig. It's made for fishing on the bottom, and I thought, why not throw this giant crawfish on there? Big fish live out deep 99% of the time, and this is a deep water bait. So there wasn't a whole lot of thought process going into that one. I just thought, you know what, why not? Pretty much, that's how it is. But the next one we're going to talk about is swim jigs. We're going to get back into the normal realm of fishing here. Swim jigs. This here is one of my favorites. This one here is just in general my favorite jig. This here I think is 1/4 ounce, if I remember right. I think it's 1/4 ounce. I have a 1/4. I think I lost my 3/4. I have 2 more, or I have 1 more. I have this one and another one. I'm pretty sure I have a 1/2, and then I have this one here, the 1/4. I need to buy me another one. I sadly lost the 3/4 the other day, so that kind of sucks. But anyway, this here is green pumpkin purple. Now, if you ask me on any given day, no matter what day it is, no matter when it is, what is my favorite jig color? Out of 99.99% of the time, my answer is going to be either green pumpkin purple or a different version of green pumpkin purple, which is called, what was this called? Green pumpkin jelly or something like that. It's basically the same color, just with a little bit more purple in it. That's going to be my answer. I love green pumpkin purple, and the fish seem to love green pumpkin purple just as much as I do. I don't know why, but they just bite the daggum thing. If I was going to tell somebody that was getting into jig fishing to get a specific color, the 3 colors I would recommend mainly would be, number 1 would be green pumpkin purple, number 2 would be something black and blue, and number 3 would be something a lot more natural, sort of a brownish color. That would be my 3 colors. But this color right here is by far my favorite jig color. Now, I've never been able to find a specific swim jig in this color. That's why I use this Arky style jig as a swim jig. But I'll drag it, I will flip it, I'll cast it out, and just swim it real slow. I'll do just about everything you can do with any other type of jig with this one jig. Now, the trailer. I've used a lot of trailers on these jigs, and I've caught a lot of fish on all of them. My 2 favorites are the 3.5 gunner, which you guys have seen me talk about that thing a lot. and then the Doxler Company mud crawler, which we'll get into that here in a little bit. But yeah, 3.5 gunner, green pumpkin magic with the green pumpkin purple. You want to catch fish, muddy water, clear water, stained water, black water, does not matter. You're going to catch something on this. Any time of the year. Last year I was catching them in the springtime. I was catching them in the summertime. I was catching them in the fall time. I'll have a couple pictures up here in a second showing a couple fish that completely engulfed that whole jig, like this whole profile. And you guys can go back in my video archives and you can see why I choose a 3.5 gunner for flipping. I love that bait for flipping. I've caught a ton of fish on it, flipping it with a Texas rig or with a swim jig, a jig head. Doesn't matter. I love throwing it as a flipping bait. I've talked about it in a whole separate video, and then suddenly I seen 2 other videos on the same subject that popped up on my recommended list, and it said literally that it came out like 2 weeks after I made that video. So kind of funny, but you know, whatever. I'm not going to go too far into it, but it is kind of funny how people just started randomly jumping on the flipping swim bait bandwagon. But I won't get too far into that. But anyway. You guys can go back to that video. I won't get too far into this, the reason why I flip swim baits. I just love flipping swim baits because it catches fish. You guys can go back to that video and find it and watch that one. So next we're going to talk about flipping swim bait, or flipping jigs. Flipping specific jigs. So this here is another jig that made by the same company that makes this green pumpkin purple. This color here, I believe, is called blue olive or something like that. I caught quite a few fish on this. One of my most exciting topwater bites of the year last year came on this jig, believe it or not. How I was fishing it was I took a 3.5 gunner, hooked it on there just normal like you would on a jig, and cast it out there by the brush pile. And I was reeling it really slowly. And suddenly, just out of nowhere from the depths of the 2-foot deep pond, couldn't even see the fish, but just suddenly all you seen was this giant explosion come up right for this jig. I set the hook, slammed the hook home, and it took me about 20 minutes of trying to figure out how I'm going to get it out of the brush pile. And then I went out and got my kayak because it was still sitting there and I had not really gone fishing with it yet. I got my brother and my mom out there to watch me make sure that I wouldn't fall in and drown or any crap like that. Got in there with my rod and everything, reeled up to the jig, unhooked the jig from the brush pile. There was no fish. The whole time I thought the fish was still on there, but it wasn't. That's why the brush guard is all messed up, because I had hooked the fish and then somewhere along the line the fish had come off and the hook had buried up into a tree limb. But that was one of the more exciting fish catches of the year last year. Sadly, I was not able to get that on video. That would have been a pretty cool video. But, you know, stuff like that happens. That's what happens a lot of the times with me. Some of the craziest stuff that happens doesn't get on video. And I'll video for half an hour and it won't work. But this jig right here, flipping jig, blue, black, and green. 3 of my favorite colors for a jig. Is that green and black and blue. That's kind of a really cool color. Probably up there in my top 5 favorite jig colors is this this multicolor scheme. But when I'm flipping a jig, I'll go off of 2 things. If I think the fish are active, I will go with a 3.5 gunner. If they're not, if I think that they're not really too active, I'll go with a Doxler Company flip out. The flipping bait I like to call the flip out because it's a great flipping bait. This color here is green pumpkin with the blue claws, the electric blue claws. Looks really good on this jig. With the little bit of the hints of blue and green on this jig, it looks really, really good. I like it a lot. That's basically what it looks like. It looks really good with that jig. And something I like about this jig that a lot of jigs don't have is this kind of a chin on the jig head. And it makes it come over the brush a lot easier, and I really like that on that one. Next, we're going to go ahead and talk about finesse jigs. So I have 2 different finesse jigs. I don't have the other one out, but I have this one here out. This one here is a finesse jig that my cousin bought me, or actually he gave them to me. I have 2 of them. The other one, the skirt broke off, and this one here is the only other one I have. This is a forget the name of the company. I cleaned out my whole desk, so now I don't have I have barely anything up here on my desk. So I don't know what the company's name was, but it was a pretty cool company. It makes these swing head hooks, swing head jigs. It's got like a little 1/0 hook. There's two things I like to do with this bait. I either like to throw a 2-inch Doc Sewer Company swim bait, or I will throw the Doc Sewer Company mud bug. Now, I haven't talked about the mud bug in a long time. And the reason why is since I started coming out with the mud crawler and the flip out and stuff like that, this bait here kind of went on the back burner for a little bit, but I tell you what, it still catches fish. I have a couple of them set up on a Ned rig. I have one set up on a Nico rig. I have a couple of them set up on football jigs in my tackle box. Where's my... Here it is. I'll show you guys a couple of them here that I have. I have it set up on this one, mud crawler or mud bug. Here's one of the Ned rigs that I've got set up. Here's another one of the football jigs. Here's another football jig that has a mud bug on it. So it definitely still does get fished. But after I came out with the mud bug and the mud crawler, the mud crawler and the flip out, this kind of went on the back burner, but it still catches fish. And it's a great finesse crawl bait. I love throwing it on a jig head, just like a Ned rig or a small Texas rig. But when you're fishing it and you're wanting to fish it for, or on a jig, this jig right here is absolutely awesome for it. This color is called Texas Crawl. It's got a little bit of green pumpkin, but it's got a lot of black and a little bit of green. There's a little bit of green in it. But the way this jig is set up is you have the EWG hook, and you basically just Texas rig it up onto this hook. And it makes it a lot more weedless. Now, I'll tell you guys a quick story real quick about this type of jig. So one day, me and my cousin, we're out fishing, and he has this spinning rod set up with one of these jigs, and he has it just set up just like that right there with the little mud bug on it. Awesome trailer. I love that thing on that jig. But he has that whole setup there on that spinning rod. Now, I use a right-handed retrieve reel all the time. Never use a left-handed retrieve reel because it's almost like trying to shoot a left-handed rifle. It's completely foreign to me. But I decided, you know what, I want to try to catch a fish. It's the left-handed reel challenge because that whole crap decided to come out around that time. So I throw it out there, and I'm sitting there and I'm hopping it, and all of a sudden I just feel a thump, and I set the hook, and I get this fish all the way up till about maybe a foot from the bank, and it pops off, and that was pretty much it. But I was like, man, I was that close to doing that left-handed reel slam crap that they tried to do here on YouTube a while back. But anyway, this is an awesome jig trailer for finesse jigs, and also, you know, if you're just in an area that has a lot of pressured fish, this little mud bug is an actually awesome Ned rig bait. That's why I have a couple of them set up in there now. I have one set up on a weedless Ned rig, and that one I showed you on the non-weedless Ned rig. But it's a great bait. Take a little small EWG like a 1 or a 2/0. And a small 1/8 ounce or 1/4 ounce bullet weight. It's a great Texas rig bait as well. It looks awesome in the water. I've caught quite a few fish on it. It's a great bait. So next we're going to talk about the micro jig. So the micro jig is one that a lot of people don't really talk about. It's kind of one of those things that they're there, but they don't get talked about a whole lot. Now, the reason the micro jig is not talked about a whole lot is because of its fish catching ability. It's absolutely insane fish catching bait. And the reason why is it's such a small natural profile, it's such a small finesse profile that even the most finicky bass in the water will bite this thing. It's a small little dainty profile that anything that doesn't even want to eat sometimes will see it and they'll be like, you know what, I want to eat it anyway. I might be full on crawfish, bluegill, and shad, but you know what, this thing looks too good. I'm going to eat it. And that's what they do. And it's actually insane how well this thing works. And it's funny to me how many pros use a micro jig like this. Like Mike Iaconelli kind of started to get this out in the opening. And I think that he kind of messed up a little bit doing that. I think he should have kept that to himself, but, you know, whatever. But he started making these little jigs, and he started using these little jigs, and he caught the crap out of fish. And these things are awesome. Now, the trailer that I use on this is completely different than any other trailer I use on any of my other baits. This is a crappie bluegill bait, believe it or not, and this is actually the Dox Lure Company 2-inch flat runner. Awesome, awesome bait for crappie and bluegill, but when you put it on this little micro jig, it just gives it a little bitty crawfish profile. And you can also, when you hop it, that bait has a lot of action to it, and it looks a lot like a little bluegill as well. I don't know if you guys have ever seen tiny little baby bluegill, but this jig, trailer, and everything looks a lot like them. It's a great bait. This is a little 1/8 ounce jig. I think it's an 1/8 ounce or something like that. Very tiny. You'll definitely need a spinning rod to throw this, but it's an awesome jig. Some of my other favorite jig trailers are these guy right here. This is the new 4-inch double tail grub by Dox Lure Company. Green Pumpkin Magic, obviously one of my favorite colors. This is great for finesse jigs. You can throw it on a football jig as well to give it a little bit of a different profile. Another one of my favorite jig trailers is the Mud Crawler by Dox Lure Company. This one here is green pumpkin with the little bit of red accents on it. Looks really cool in the water on like a red, green pumpkin and orange jig. It looks great with this bait. And then obviously the flip out, the mud crawler, the mud bug, the giant mud crawler, and the little guy here, and 3.5 gunner. If I had to pick out of all these jigs that I have up here, if I had to pick one, it would be a toss-up between this one here and this one here. I guess it would depend on what the circumstances were about the, I can only pick one. If it was the fact of catching a lot of fish or fishing pressured water, I would definitely go with this guy right here because it's small. He catches a lot of fish. Doesn't matter how big they are, and it's great in pressured water. But if it was looking for bigger fish, I would go with this guy right here, Green Pumpkin Purple, 3.5 gunner, and Green Pumpkin Magic. Just a killer right there. I'll throw some pictures in here, like I said a second ago, with that jig showing how engulfed the bait was in that fish's mouth. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. If you want to purchase any of the baits in this video, you can go to the email in the description down below. You can email me about the baits, and I'll tell you about them and how many come in a pack. They're all $4 a pack. They just have different amounts in each pack. So yeah, thanks for watching once again. Subscribe if you have not already. Go check out the Coast to Coast Outdoors videos. We'll hopefully have one of those up soon here from me. So yeah, thanks for watching once again.